This is a question I'm curious about. This book just came out this month, but obviously you were working on it for at least the past few years, I imagine. One person is asking a question: was there something specific that led you to start writing about this? But I'm also wondering, like, what would you have done had Kamala Harris won the election? Because it's not that the fundamentals of your book would have changed very much. And obviously, I mean, I hate to say this is great timing for your book, but I'm wondering what led to you writing this particular book about this particular topic to answer this question, and also what would have happened if the election had gone the other way.
Those are really good questions. So the first question is what led to this project? I mean, the book really followed pretty organically from my reporting as I kept research. Look, the first book I wrote published in this area, Good News Club, was about the war on public education. And then I realized the war on public education was one part of a much larger war on, modern American democracy. And I really explored the role of Christian nationalism in that, in the power worshippers. But then as I keep doing my research, I started to recognize that what we're really seeing in our politics is, especially you see it with Project 2025, as a marriage between the religious right in America and the new right, which is a movement that is, I would say, less explicitly Christian nationalist, but also much more explicitly anti-democratic in some ways. So I realized that there was just a much bigger story. And I also thought I need to sort of make clear that there are different categories of leadership in this movement. And I thought about sort of how to express how they work together in a way to sort of show that the fissures, I mean, this movement isn't always united in everything. They're rowing in the same boat, as it were, but there are a lot of differences that can and should be exploited. So that's what sort of led to Money, Lies, and God. And by the way, had Trump not won the election, I would have totally taken it and been super happy. People are like, what are you talking about? We're going in a different direction. And, you have a couple, maybe my 10 friends and my 10 other family members would have bought copies, but I would have taken it very gladly.
I mean, Leonard Leo would still be doing his thing if Kamala Harris won. All the forces that we are talking about would still have a lot of impact.
They would, but people wouldn't want to think about it, but
Right.
it would still be happening.
Right.
This movement I saw Steve Bannon speak recently, and I got to say, he's a good speaker. I know, it's okay. I mean, he was talking to a bunch of young people and activists, and he said, when you lost in 2020, you didn't get into bed and pull up the covers and start sucking your thumbs. You got out there and you decided to fight. And I just thought, well, he's right. Now, of course, they spread lies and they found new populations to spread their untruths to persuade with their untruths and conspiracism. But they also turned out to vote. They went after low propensity voters. They went after the Amish, for goodness sake, and they got them. No one else bothered to do that. They turned out their base, and they don't start like reaching out to people in September. If the election is in November, they campaign throughout the election cycle.
They are if you are in that right-wing ecosystem, they are feeding you this information in every possible format all the time. And that is frightening.
And they're creating a sense of community among their followers, and they're giving people an immediate path to political engagement. And, the books I've written, I remember when Power Worshippers came off, Andrew Seidel said, it's like if the religion, like the Christian nationalist movement, is a watch and you're taking the back off the watch so people can see how it works. And I tried to do that with each of my books to show, here's how they did it. They did it like they actually created a movement. And if they can do it, maybe we can do some of those things too. Like, we wouldn't wish to emulate their most craven tactics. We don't want to inspire political violence. We don't want to spread lies. But that determination to turn out the vote, to sort of educate people about the issues that should matter to them, these are things that we can do, and we can do them throughout the year, every part of the election season.
To that end, I was wondering if conservatives and the religious right has so easily been able to hijack an entire political party, what is preventing progressives from doing that with Democrats and maybe using our power for good? Why is it so hard to find that level of, I don't know, cultist mentality on the other side?
I think there are a couple of issues. I think for a long time, people didn't recognize the threat, the nature of the threat that they were facing. I think true conservative Republicans didn't notice it. You know, they said, this is a group, we can make use of them, and then they seized control of the party. And I think a lot of Republicans now feel like they don't even have a party anymore, but they were sort of blindsided by this. I think that it's also hard to unite a very large and disparate group of people who are not, very predisposed to authoritarianism by nature. So they can be quite contentious. At the end of Money Lies in God, I have a whole section on what we can do to shore up a democratic movement. And part of it is we need a big tent.
You actually say we could take solace in the fact that we are in the majority and they are divided.
Yes. I think more Americans would like to live in a society with democratic ideals and principles and institutions than want to live in a cronyistic, kleptocratic, autocratic system with authoritarian features and theocratic features. Like, I just don't think that's how most Americans want to live their lives.
Yeah,
and
we just need them to come out and vote.
Yes, well, we need to invest in the infrastructure of a real pro-democracy movement. We need to not purity test one another. We're not going to agree on everything. We shouldn't. It's like a big family, This one wants a pony. She's not going to get it, right? But if we can agree on more than we can disagree on, I think we can work together.
This is a similar question along those lines. What steps can be taken to reclaim democratic values in the U.S.? And are the Democrats capable of doing anything to combat this in the long run? You did address some of this already. I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to add.
Well, I think that one thing I would add is, first of all, yes, people are capable. I think there are no guarantees, but if there's will to be done and sort of strategic moves, then it can be done. And I think that what can ordinary people do? I mean, every day, who are not involved in politics or launching lawsuits or the like, I think it's really important to get involved locally. Sometimes we focus so much on the national picture that we forget what's happening in our own communities. Well, if we don't do that, if we don't take active roles, guess who comes in and does it? It's the Moms for Liberty. So, all the moms screaming at school board members about how they're turning public schools into gender change factories. Not true, of course.
Which is a surprise to anyone who's been in a public school.
They're so busy with reading and math. It's reading and math, more reading and math, and then test prep.
The idea that teachers have the time to do, much less the money to do any of these things that they're being accused of, is hilarious.
I know.
Were you surprised when during the Pete Hegseth confirmation hearings? I was surprised by how little it came up that he has these tattoos that promote a form of very conservative Christianity. His religious zealotry did not come up nearly as much as I had thought.
Yeah, I wonder if people didn't know how to talk about it. I think the problem is often that people who are liberals or moderates, we all want to be tolerant of one another's religion. We don't want to be against anybody's faith. We understand that religious freedom is a really important principle in this country, and it just is. It's a kind of human right. So I think when we see sort of extremist forms of ideology, if it has a sort of banner, if it falls under the banner of religion, it's hard for a lot of people to talk about it. But if we don't identify, anti-democratic ideologies when they appear, then we are really doing a disservice to the institution of democracy itself and to the religious freedom of people whose rights might be subsumed when a movement seizes control of power and imposes its will and its values on everyone else.
I know your book has only been out for a short while, but I'm wondering if you've heard at all from any Christians, conservative Christians, who may have been surprised by anything they read and they reached out to you about it.
I hear from Christian readers every single day, multiple times a day. And you know what's really interesting is I hear from a lot of pastors in, like, I don't know, I probably shouldn't name it, like states that are like where they're really isolated and they're pastoring these small churches. And all of a sudden they're like really concerned because their congregants are getting all this information from Telegram or YouTube or whatever. And all of a sudden there's all this conspiracism in their church and they don't know how to address it because, first of all, they don't want to lose their position at church. They, it's hard to be a pastor. You have to pastor the whole church. You're not supposed to take political positions. Of course, the super conservative pastors don't mind doing that. But a lot of these pastors are, I would say there's like small c conservative, they might be, not comfortable with abortion or things like that. But at the same time, they don't, when all of a sudden people are talking about the great replacement or people are talking about, QAnon or things like that, they're really worried. And they reach out to me and they're like, I don't know what to do. I can't lose my job. Who will pay my health insurance? I got kids to raise. I
What do
want
you
to
tell
talk.
them?
I mostly, honestly, I just listen. And there are organizations that I can point them to that are deeply concerned about this stuff. I mean, there's a whole faith-based sphere. I think about people like Amanda Tyler, Christians Against Christian Nationalism, the Baptist Joint Committee, Vote Common Good, the New Evangelicals. There are all these different, or Faithful America. All these different organizations are trying to work on this stuff, faith-based organizations, and perhaps they have support for these pastors in ways that I don't. But I think that what these pastors really want is someone to listen and empathize with their plight.
You imagine they have very few people they could talk to about this. I think I read one of these pastors say, I might get these people for an hour, 2 hours a week on a Sunday. Fox News has them for all the rest of the time, this whole right-wing ecosystem. And you
Yeah,
can't
that's
compete with that.
yeah, it's true.
This is a question from a viewer. The question is, who's the most dangerous Christian nationalist right now? Do you got a top 3 to 5 list?
Uh, no, because it's the system that is the danger, not any particular individuals. I mean, it's really interesting. The movement is very good at cultivating leadership, and because it's organization driven, when one person falls out, we saw this with, who was it, Jerry Falwell
Yeah,
Jr.
Jerry Falwell Jr., yeah.
There's plenty of others to take their place. I mean, there are a lot of very powerful leaders right now. I name a number of them in Power Worshippers and Money Lies in God, and for that matter, in Good News Club. I think about, some of the people like Leonard Leo, who is very powerful in that sphere. I think about people like Bob McEwen, who is very powerful in the networking sphere. I think about people like Ralph Reed, who's got that sort of Faith and Freedom Coalition, who is a very very smart strategist of the movement, or people like Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, Charlie Kirk, who is like a sort of up and coming as a really vital youth leader. But there are so many others that I write about. I almost feel bad naming any particular individuals because there are just so many.
I think I just have one last question for you here. Do you ever wish you could spend a couple years writing about something happier?
Thank you. Well, I honestly, yeah, like wouldn't life be nicer if I could write about like the secret life of trees or something like
Right?
that? But here's the thing. This movement is fascinating. It seized control of one of our two major political parties. I don't think you can understand what's happening in American politics without understanding this movement and its people. So, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't derive some pleasure from writing about it. I do. I think that I'm an investigative journalist at heart. I love going into the spaces and seeing on the ground what's happening, and that it maybe pleasure is the wrong word, but it's interesting. It's
And it's
really
informing people, and there's
interesting.
value to that. I'm not
Right.
an investigative journalist. I'm merely a commentator, but that's the same thing. Like, it's not that I'm taking joy in any of this, but I do appreciate having a platform where I can try to inform other people about this very serious, very important movement that is happening. That, like you said, a lot of people don't even know it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say is that people are people everywhere. So a lot of the people I meet in these spaces, like members of the rank and file, a lot of them are really nice people. They love their families. They care about their communities. They do believe they're doing what's best for America. They see themselves as righteous patriots. But all of their well-meaning efforts are being harnessed in service of an agenda that is polarizing our country, making it unreasonable, you know, sort of inculcating large numbers of Americans in untruths and propaganda and driving support for an anti-democratic agenda. And I feel like that's deeply concerning.
Well, thank you so much for your time here. Um, I've had a chance to read the book.
You know,
I don't want to say it's good because it's horrifying. It is informative and fascinating. And if you're not familiar with the names and ideas that are circulating and really forming a basis for our country that is really scary, you should absolutely read it. It's called Money, Lies, and God Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Thank you so much, Katherine Stewart.
thank you so much, Hemant.